All right, Genesis 22. So here's how the text reads. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac. Now I want y'all to grab your pearls as we read this. Who read it already? Because I told y'all last week to read Genesis 22. Okay, so 2 of y'all read it already, so don't give it away, right? All right. So here we are. Let me start it over. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there, listen y'all, as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. Here God's doing this thing with Abraham again, right? Mm-hmm. We read already that God tells him, pack up your stuff, all your family, all your livestock, and go to a land that I'm going to show you. Which means what? Doing as you're told, which means Abram didn't know where he was being sent, right? He didn't know what was going to happen. And so here, God tells him to sacrifice his son, his only son Isaac, as a burnt offering on the mountain that I'll show you. So God's not even giving him, at this point, where to go. Just, this is what you need to do, and get up and do it. All right? So verse 3, so Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Somebody can read more start at verse 5. Anybody?
Then Abraham said to his young man, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood of the...
Okay, I want you to stop. I have a slide that I want you to look at and tell me what you think. Okay, let me go this way. All right, so I want to show our viewers this slide. All right, so what do you see here?
A bunch of wood.
You see, and where's the wood?
On his back.
On whose back?
On the young man, on the son, Isaac.
On Isaac's back, right? And so, it looks like the grown man, who's that?
Abraham.
That's Abraham, all right?
Leading him.
So it looks like they're having a conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So tell me what that looks like. Tell me what that looks like.
Their journey, like the young Isaac is carrying the load.
Okay.
He's either trying to gain some knowledge or listening to his father.
Okay, so he's there walking along. He's looks like Isaac is listening to his father. They're having a nice little father-son conversation.
Wow.
Yeah.
It looks like a regular day in the neighborhood.
It looks like a regular day in the neighborhood, right? Okay. Now, in that day and time, of course, in that ancient time, they were used to sacrificing animals. So I'm pretty sure Isaac's carrying the wood. He knows, Daddy's gonna make a sacrifice, right? And I get to carry the wood, right? A big responsibility, probably. And so here they go carrying the wood. Isaac's carrying the wood up the hill. All right, so go.
At this time, he didn't know it. Okay. Oop.
No, he doesn't know. Yes.
He even tells the slaves, his hired men, his young men, it says, stay here with the donkey, the boy and I will go over there, we will worship, and then we will come back to you.
Okay.
And I'm sure Isaac heard that.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah.
So, like I said, regular day in the neighborhood.
Regular day in the neighborhood.
He didn't give any hints or leave anything out.
Mm-hmm. So, now what did God tell tell Abraham about the burnt offering? What did he tell him?
To sacrifice his own son.
He said to sacrifice his own son. But here, as you pointed out, as Abraham is talking to his young men, his servants, or his people that work for him, his entourage, he tells them, all right, you watch the donkey, me and the boy are going to go over here, but we're going to be back.
Not as to alarm them to anything.
Wait, that's interesting. Not to alarm them. That's interesting, because usually when I have heard this text or read this text, I feel like sometimes when we read this passage, we want to spiritualize it, and we don't want Abraham to look like he's a bad guy. And so what I've heard people say is that the reason why Abraham said, me and the boy will be back, is because Abraham had faith that God was going to deliver his son. But you give us a different way of looking at that. Maybe it was so that Abraham didn't alarm his son or the other people around him.
Because it would have been some mess.
Yeah. Abraham. So if Abraham would have said, "I'll be back,"
someone would have tried to stop him, where his son could have ran.
Okay.
That could have alarmed him and been like, "What do you mean?"
Okay.
I believe at that point in time, Abraham had such a relationship by what God had already done. Pack everything and go. You will have a son in your old age. Sarah will conceive. He had just had a relationship at that point where, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what's going on, or if you even save my son. Because I really believe that. Because I just know for me, God would have said, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do it. You show me who you are. Okay. It's gonna happen like you said.
Yeah, I can't tell you how to sacrifice my daughter. I can't tell you how to walk up the hill with her carrying the wood on her back, and I can't tell you I would have done that. I'm just gonna be honest.
I mean, at some point, I probably would have either hinted to him that something was going on, or he would have been able to see the distress.
Yeah,
me
the distress.
Trying to withhold that from him.
Yes. I don't think I would have told my daughter this was going to happen. No, I wouldn't have done that. But I hear you as you're saying that Isaac would have, and for you, if it was your son, he could have seen the distress on your face.
That walk, without telling Isaac, had to be difficult for Abraham to try to focus on something else other than fact.
Yeah.
Of what the end purpose was.
Yeah. Now, let me see. Most of you have children in here. Have you ever had to hide something from your child that was a difficult situation? Or maybe not hide, but just act like...
As if nothing's going on.
Yeah, act like nothing's going on because you don't want to distress them.
Yes.
Right? You ever had to do so? I see what you're saying in terms of Abraham not wanting to cause distress. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why he told everybody, me and the boy will be back. Right?
And then as a mother, didn't you not want her to be distressed because it would only just stress you out?
Even more. Yes. Yes, of course. So that was a real good point. I had to do a break and say something about that. All right. So go ahead and finish reading. Where are we? We are at 6. Okay.
Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. He himself carried the fire and the knife.
Okay, let's back up. Read the first part of 6 again. What did Abraham do?
Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son.
One point, they're walking up the hill. Isaac's got the wood on his back, thinking, yeah, Dad's gonna sacrifice an animal to the Lord. And then they get up to the hill, and Abram's now laying the wood on Isaac. That would have freaked you out.
Well, I think.
I would feel betrayed.
You would have felt. Well, okay, hold those thoughts, because that's where we're going to get in. So here's some things I want us to think about. So let's explore Isaac. Let's explore Isaac's thoughts. Okay. So what were some of his thoughts, you might imagine, as they were going up the hill?
Where's the sacrifice?
Where's the sacrifice? Okay. Going up the hill, his thoughts. But I'm talking about just as they were walking up the hill, going to this place, because in his mind, we're going to sacrifice. My father's going to sacrifice. So going up the hill.
Well, we could also look at it from this point of view. I am with my father. I'm spending time with my father.
Yes.
You know, not so much a sacrifice. It's, you know, I get to be with Dad.
I get to be with Dad one-on-one. Good. All right. So what might his thoughts have been once they arrive at the mountain, on the top of the mountain?
Where's the sacrifice?
Okay, Dad, we're
Where's the
here.
animal?
Where's the animal? Where's the sacrifice? All right. So read a little bit more.
Laid it on his son, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the two of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, Father, he said, Here I am, my son. He said, The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?
Exactly. Who said that? One of y'all said he's wondering you said that. Yes. Where's the burnt offering? Where's the sacrifice? So now he's asking some questions. Because 2 + 2 is not adding up to 4 right about now. Right? All right. So keep reading. Verse 8.
Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So the two of them then walked on
Okay.
together.
Mm-hmm.
When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac.
Wait a minute. He bound his son Isaac?
Yeah. So he tied him up.
So he tied his son up
As you would an animal.
as you would an animal. All right, let's keep reading.
And he laid him on the altar on top of the wood.
Okay, there it is.
Then-
Somebody else read 10 and 4 through 14. Go ahead.
Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son.
Mm-hmm.
But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven.
Okay, let's just stop at verse 10. All right, read that again.
Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the
Nope,
Lord...
just 10.
Oh, just 10.
Not 11, just 10. All right, so here's what I want to talk about. What do you think Isaac might have been thinking as he's laying on this altar and sees his father raise the knife?
He's probably thinking.
What could he have been thinking?
He did something wrong.
WTF, thinking he did something wrong. What else? What may he have been feeling? See, and the reason I ask these questions, fear, terror. The reason I ask this is because as I was reading this, I'm thinking, how is it, as a child, I heard this story over and over again, and it never traumatized me, right? And I never thought anything about that. And you know what it made me think? It made me think that there are parts of the Bible that desensitize us because of the way they're taught. These passages are taught that desensitize us to child abuse. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Because he would have definitely went to jail for
This
that.
text, where is the horror at what we are reading? I've never heard anybody, especially growing up, that expressed horror at this. But it has all been sort of spiritualized. But as I think about this text and other texts, it makes me think that, boy, we have been through Scripture, through how we have read it, through how we have interpreted, in many cases, desensitized to child abuse. Because this right here, is what we would call an adverse childhood experience. Now, in the last, I think, several years, there has been a lot of research that has been published that the medical profession and the therapeutic profession, counseling profession, social workers, and even ministry people have been exploring the impact of adverse childhood experiences on the health and well-being of people once they become adults. And even during childhood, one of the things that we've discovered is that adverse childhood experiences such as, and we'll look at that, did I turn this off? All right, adverse childhood experiences such as things like child sexual abuse, that's an adverse childhood experience, physical violence, parental neglect. So adverse childhood experiences, like I was saying, are things like sexual abuse, physical violence, parental neglect, parental abandonment. If you have a mentally ill parent as a child, or if you have an incarcerated caregiver or an incarcerated person in your immediate family, that can be, those are traumatic experiences, right? That's exactly what they are. And so trauma, when we think about trauma, trauma is an emotional wound resulting from a shocking event or multiple and repeated life-threatening experiences that may cause lasting negative effects on a person. And here's what it does. Here's what this emotional wound does. It disrupts the path of healthy physical, emotional, spiritual, and intellectual development. Is there anybody that would argue that what happened to Isaac, laying on that stack of wood, seeing his father raise a knife? It doesn't matter that when you finish reading, right? When you finish reading this text, you know that there's an angel that comes that keeps Abraham from stabbing his son. And you didn't know that? Okay, well, we're going to finish reading that. That happens. But what about before that happens? That's true. Can you so right. So when we look at the definition of trauma as a emotional wound that results from a shocking event, this was a shocking event.
I think even though it doesn't carry through, I think there has to be some kind of break in their relationship, because I can only imagine, like, if a caregiver of mine would to have put me in a life-threatening situation, much less holding a knife to me,
right?
The respect would be lost.
Yes, so
a lot of the things that need to go on in a relationship,
like trust.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and we'll get to it as we continue in Genesis, because now you have this background of the relationship between Abraham and Isaac, you'll be paying attention to Isaac as he grows and as he becomes a man, and as you know, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts about his life and how this traumatic event may have impacted him. But certainly it had to have. It had to have, because even though this happened in an ancient time, children are still children. The nature of children is to trust, right? Is to trust their caregivers, is to trust their parents, is to trust their fathers and mothers. And here, even though Abraham didn't carry it out, and that's another thing, Abraham didn't carry it out not because he changed his mind, but because he was stopped.
So do you think that Isaac saw
Well, let's read. Let's read the rest, okay? Let's read the rest. So, I'll start at verse 9 again. I'll start at verse 9, and then I'll just read till the end. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound, I can't get over that he was bound. I can't get over that. So his father tied him up and probably tied his hands behind his back, right? Like you said, like an animal. No. So his father did that to him, bound him.
It doesn't go into detail because human nature would be to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't go into detail.
So it doesn't show Isaac responding anyway. The text doesn't say anything like that. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. The text just doesn't say it.
That's what I wrote down. Is the scene for me would have looked way different.
Okay.
Because it didn't show any emotion on either part.
It does not.
But as a mother, if I was told to sacrifice my child, I wouldn't be as a sacrifice to God, in worship, being all right, God. There would be a lot of emotion and raw emotion,
right,
more than likely on both parts, because I've just tied up my child, and he's seen the person he trusts doing this to him.
Right, and from what we know and have already read about Abraham, we know that Abraham shows emotions.
He does.
Can y'all remember any instances where Abraham showed
He
something?
was scared when he told Sarai to lie. He was
yes.
scared.
So he showed. That's right. So he showed. So Abraham shows emotions.
He's got them.
But for some reason, the writer of this text is not telling us anything about his emotions. He's in. When we talk about mind states, where is he?
Logic.
He's in his logic mind.
Yeah.
Right. So the text doesn't deal anything about the emotional mind here. It is just his logic mind. God told me to do this. At least that's what I understand. At least that's what he said God told him to do, right? God told him black and white thinking. Exactly.
He's obedient.
He's obedient to what he believes he heard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's obedient, always has been.
Yeah. And what did we say about obedience? Go ahead. I think you got it.
You can be obedient and still not believe.
Yes. You can be obedient and still not believe, right? And still not really have faith. You can do what you hear somebody telling you to do. That doesn't mean you believe them, you trust them. You can be in obedience. So you can be obedient and still not believe, right? You can do it. You can go through the motions and still not believe. All right, so he bound his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. Abraham's intention was to kill his one and only son. That was his intention. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And so there are all kinds of good things, right, that we can deduce, that we can find in this text in terms of that God did provide. He looks around and finds a ram that he can offer instead of his son. That's not the point that I want us to lift up, that I want to talk about. I want to explore Isaac and the emotional ramifications of what happened. And the reason I want to do this with the text is it's because I think often in the church, often in our Bible studies and Christian teaching, we don't put enough emphasis on emotional woundedness, right? We don't talk in our churches about child abuse. We don't talk about those things. Huh?
It's usually sugar-coated.
It's usually sugar-coated, hush, justified.
Or that God made it all okay.
Mm-hmm. And so, like I said earlier, I think sometimes when we read texts like this, we don't express the horror at what that might have been like for that child. And so we become desensitized to the abuse of children. It doesn't horrify us.
I believe that's up to the spiritual leader who is preaching that message. And like you said, unfortunately, a lot of churches aren't open to that. And a lot of leaders don't see it from that point of view.
Right.
So when throughout the ages it's been preached from look what God did and not look what Abraham did because God asked him to. Look what he put his son through.
Mm-hmm.
Look what he went through distress as a parent. All of this because God said.
Right.
And I think if it would have been taught through the ages with your perception, like you're saying, then, I mean, glory to God would have been magnified because, like, this one man put his child through all of that, knowing not just he was what he went through as a father, but he put his child through.
Right. So it would look at humanizing these children in the text, and even humanizing Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, because when we talked about Hagar and Ishmael, we also talked about the emotional toll, the emotional ramifications of what all was happening. So when we bring in the emotional aspect, the emotional woundedness, it's almost like it makes it okay and it makes it safe for us to talk about emotions. These painful, hurtful emotions. And so we don't feel like we have to cover it up. We don't feel like we have to deny it if we see it in the biblical text, if we talk about it, if we unpack it, right? And if we express horror and not try to spiritualize everything and not try to jump to, but God provided. Yeah, but what did they go through before God provided, right? There was some emotional damage.
I can honestly say that reading this at this time in my life was difficult for me because all I could think of was Darlie Routier. Because when she killed her son years ago,
Yes.
she said that God told her to do it. And so all I'm thinking is mentally ill.
Yes.
That's all I can think of.
Uh-huh.
What if you just are saying God said it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think from
That's why I said this is what Abraham said God said, right?
Right.
I'm not saying God said it or didn't, but the text is written in such a way that this is what God told Abraham to do, right? But we also know that in our day and time, there are people who have mental illness that have said the same thing and go all the way through and kill their children or maim them or cause them great physical harm. Yes, cause them great physical harm.
on my perspective, like, yeah, you're not gonna sit in a church service on Sunday in a pew and discuss the horror of what happened.
Why not? Why
Or-
wouldn't you? Why wouldn't?
Typically, it's not gonna set at ease with everybody. It's gonna stir stuff up in people, and even maybe make them distrust God because it got to that point. It can't be all sugar coated and popsicles for everybody. You know, most of what I experienced growing up was that church service that made you leave like, I feel better now. Like, everything's okay. Like, God got my back. Everything's just gonna be fine. But it's not reality. Like you
Right.
said, what extent of emotional damage did it have to come to that God came through?
Say that again.
To what extent of emotional damage do you have to go through to end up God providing?
Yeah.
God's not going to provide off that because that's being spoon fed or just handed over to. He wants you to go through a process for him to have the ultimate glory and to things look better at the end, knowing that you didn't do any of it yourself.
Okay. I want to push back on some of that. Not all of it. Some of it. And maybe say it a little differently. Because one of the things that I heard you saying was that often the sermons that we hear on Sunday or whenever we hear sermons, it is everything's going to be all right. God is going to provide. But while we're waiting on God to provide, many times there's pain and there's hurt and there's woundedness that we're not talking about. So we're not giving people a realistic view on life, even though they know it because they're living it. But they're going to church, they're going to the gathered community, and in many churches, they're not getting the truth of what's happening in their lives, because lives are complicated, right? Lives have hurt and pain and joy and happiness, right? Not just joy and happiness. So here's why I'm pushing back. I'm pushing back because on the part where God needs for us to go through this pain so that God can get the glory. That's the part that I'm pushing back on, because I don't think God needs for us to be in pain before we give God glory, you know. But pain, I remember hearing a Hebrew Bible scholar by the name of Renita Weems say that pain is the dues we pay for living in this world. So pain comes, it's a part of life, right? It is a part of life. But what I'm concerned about, and one of the reasons why I taught this text this particular way, is because, the more familiar I become with trauma and trauma-informed care, now when I really look at that text, I can't help but see a traumatic experience, you know, that our church has, and I'm making a general statement, right? Because, you know, maybe there are some people who've preached this on a Sunday morning in a way that lifts up Isaac's traumatic experience. You know, can you think about, and all of you have had some kind of traumatic experience, right? Can you imagine being in church on a Sunday morning and someone stands up in the pulpit and talks about child sexual abuse and says that it is a sin and that it is wrong and that if it happened to you, it was not your fault and that you are valuable and you are special and God didn't make you to be treated that way? Can you, if I would have heard something like that from the pulpit, man, that would have helped me a whole lot. It would have helped me a whole lot. With how, because I was, feeling worthless and it's, what's wrong with me? And,
I pretty much remember honor your mother and father, respect your mother and father, obey blindly, and especially in this story, it was about Abraham obeying no matter what his father.
Mm-hmm. So, right. And so what might that sound like to someone whose parents are abusive to them?
Yeah.
Right? So when you say that, because the scriptures have those words in it, honor your mother and father. If you're teaching in a healthy way, you have to add, some people have parents who have abused them. What does honor your father and mother look like for those kids, right? Yeah. Don't exclude them from that conversation. Yeah.
My youth pastor, actually, I had my best friend. I helped her run away from her parents because her mom
Okay.
was very abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we were like 14 or 15.
Okay.
And we went to our church, and they had like a youth building, so we could go play after school, not
Okay.
just on a Wednesday or a
Sure.
Sunday. And we had went and hung out. We were having refreshments, and my youth pastor came up and said, I need to talk to you. I was like, okay. And he explained that he had already called the cops because he had gotten a report that she had ran away. Her mom called the cops.
Wow.
And he had to turn her back into the cops because it was his duty.
Mm.
And I was like, what do you mean? You know she's abusive. Look at her arms. You can see bruises on her. You can see grab marks on her. How can you do that being a Christian? How can you do that being a leader, saying you're going to have to turn her to the cops when she's trying to get help, when she's trying to run away from what she's abused by? He was like, well, it's just something I have to do.
Wow.
No, at
Did
that
he
moment,
ever go to the parents and talk to them and confront them about the abuse or nothing?
No. He just said because we went to church, it was his obligation to do what the law said.
Yeah.
And he had to turn her in because she was a runaway.
Wow.
I was like, back to what she left from, not trying to get her help, not
Right,
trying to
right.
fix the situation.
Right. Again, you see what I'm saying? Desensitized to the abuse of children, you know, because we overlook these passages and we jump right to God provided.
Or parents that use it, spare the rod and spoil the child.
That's another one.
It's just discipline.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Any more thoughts on this text?
So my question was, it said the only son, Abraham's only son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Why? I mean, because Ishmael is still
his son.
his
That's
son.
right. That's right.
Why do they keep addressing
Well,
Isaac
they-
as his only son?
He only has a legitimate son. He only has one.
Yeah, that, and
Um,
he loves this one, even though you're not supposed to pick children, but you will.
This is
Yeah.
the one that
Being
to carry
in
on.
his position, I would say he will.
yeah, but man, that brings up another
Another
point of conversation.
Yeah.
Because we know
Mhm.
Isaac was not his only son.
Mhm.
Ishmael was his son
And it not
as
only,
well.
It didn't say it once, but like two or
It over and
different
over
times.
again.
And I was like,
Puts emphasis on Isaac.
Yeah.
And I think we know, we understand because the promise, we read that, the promise of becoming a great nation was made to Abraham about a child that he would have with Sarah, right? And the promise was to Isaac. We know that intellectually, we know that because that's what the text teaches us, right? But we also know that Ishmael was Abraham's son, and we know that Abraham loved Ishmael as well. In fact, Abraham wanted Ishmael to be the one. But the text tells us that God was like, not going to be him. And so what does it mean for a parent to show preference? Again, let's look at the emotion. What impact would that have on the child who is not the favored one,
Well,
right? What impact would that have on the child who is the favored one, right? Think of all the emotional fallout of that, right? All right, so this was great. Listen, Facebook, thank you for joining us tonight. My Thursday night Bible class with the women of New Friends, New Life. I appreciate your presence. I don't know, we'll do this again. I would love for you to make some comments on how you found the class, and we may do this next Thursday. I don't know. Ladies, what y'all think?
that'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome? Okay, we'll see. All right, peace. Take care. Peace, Dr. Irie.